Iran as the protagonist. Coincidence? There is no coincidence in the word of God. Chedorlaomer and his allies invaded Canaan, destroyed entire cities, massacred the giants of the Rephaim, Zuzi, and Amim. They were unstoppable. They dominated the region for 12 years, collecting heavy tributes. In the 13th year, the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah revolted. Chedorlaomer returned with a fury. He sacked Sodom and Gomorrah, took all the goods, all the food, and captured Abraham's nephew Lot. But what happened next is supernatural. Abraham received the news. His nephew was captured, and then the patriarch did something unthinkable. With only 318 men born in his house, he pursued an army of 4 kings. The chase went all the way to Dan, in the far north. Abraham divided his men, attacked at night, and the impossible happened. Elam's army was destroyed. Chedorlaomer was killed. All the captives were freed. All the goods were recovered. Prophetic Lesson 1. From the beginning, God demonstrated that no power from the east can prevail against those who walk in covenant with him. But the story was just beginning. Centuries passed. Elam and Madai grew. They became strong. They built cities. They developed cultures. And then, in God's perfect timing, something extraordinary happened. Comment Elam if this revelation shocked you. Around 740 BC, the prophet Isaiah was in Jerusalem. The northern kingdom had already fallen. Judah was threatened, and it was in this context that God revealed something impossible to believe. In Isaiah chapter 44, verse 28, God declares, "What do I say about Cyrus? He is my shepherd, and he will do all my pleasure." And then in chapter 45, verse 1, this is what the Lord says to his anointed one, to Cyrus. Please stop and process. This, God called a pagan Persian king the Anointed One, in Hebrew, Mashiach, the same word used for the Messiah. But there is one detail that will astound you. When Isaiah wrote this, Cyrus had not yet been born. The prophecy was given 150 years before Cyrus appeared. Not only did God foresee the future, but he also appointed the deliverer before he existed. Why? Because God had a plan that was impossible to believe. Israel was destroyed, Jerusalem in ruins, the temple burned to the ground, the people enslaved in Babylon for 70 years. It looked like the end. It looked like God's promises had failed. But God said, "I will use Persia to free my people. A king named Cyrus will be my instrument." And then it started to happen. Around 550 BC, a young Persian prince named Cyrus II began his rise. First, he unified the Persian tribes. Then he did the unthinkable. He challenged his own grandfather, Astyages, king of the Medes. The battle seemed impossible. The Medes were more numerous, more experienced. But in the middle of the battle, the Median army defected to Cyrus's side. In a single day, Cyrus went from being a rebel prince to king of the Medo-Persian Empire. But how could that defeat Babylon? Babylon was invincible. Its walls were so thick that 6 chariots could run side by side. Its gates were made of solid bronze and weighed tons. It had stored food for 20 years of siege. The Euphrates River flowed inside the city, ensuring inexhaustible water. Its army was the terror of the nations. But God had it all planned, and he revealed every detail to the prophet Daniel, who was inside Babylon. Hold on tight, because what happened next is chilling. Daniel, a young slave in Babylon, had become one of the kingdom's top advisors. He had interpreted dreams, survived the lion's den, and seen his friends walk out alive from a fiery furnace. But on that fateful night, Daniel received a vision that would change everything. Years before, King Nebuchadnezzar had a terrifying dream. A colossal statue stood before him, a head of pure gold shining like the sun, polished silver chest and arms reflecting the light, bronze belly and thighs strong and sturdy, iron legs, indestructible, feet of iron mixed with clay, weak and divided. The king woke up in a panic. He called all the wise men of Babylon, but he made an impossible demand. "Tell me the dream and the interpretation. If you cannot, you will die." The wise men pleaded, "O king, Tell us the dream and we will give you the interpretation." "No. If you are really wise, tell me what I dreamed, or prepare to die." The death decree was signed. Soldiers began arresting the wise men. Daniel and his friends were on the list, but Daniel asked for an audience with the king. And before the most powerful monarch on earth, he declared, "There is a God in heaven who reveals mysteries. He has shown the king what will happen in the last days." And then Daniel described the dream perfectly, every detail, every color, every metal. Nebuchadnezzar fell to his knees. "Truly, your God is God of gods." But then came the interpretation that would change history. "You, O king, are the head of gold. God has given you the kingdom, the power, the strength, and the glory. But after you another kingdom will arise, inferior to yours, the chest and arms of silver. 2 arms, 2 nations, Medium and Persia. 1 arm stronger than the other. Persia would dominate Medium." And then it happened exactly as prophesied. Cyrus the Great, after unifying the Medes and the Persians, conquered Lydia, the richest kingdom of the time. King Croesus, famous for his wealth, was defeated. Asia Minor, all of present-day Turkey under his rule. Mesopotamia, the cradle of civilization, conquered. And then he set his sights on Babylon. But look how God works. It was October 539 BC. King Belshazzar, Nebuchadnezzar's grandson, was completely safe. Cyrus had been outside the walls for months, but the city was unassailable. So Belshazzar decided to throw a party to show his contempt. He invited 1,000 nobles. The wine flowed like water. Music echoed through the halls. And then, at the climax of the party, Belshazzar gave the most blasphemous command possible. "Take the sacred vessels out of the temple in Jerusalem." Those gold and silver vessels that Nebuchadnezzar had stolen, consecrated to the God of Israel, holy, set apart. Belshazzar and his nobles drank wine from them. They toasted the gods of Babylon. They praised the idols of gold, silver, bronze, iron, wood, and stone. It was the final end. Heaven could no longer remain silent. Suddenly, in the middle of the party, out of nowhere, a supernatural hand appeared, floating in the air. No body, just the hand. And it began to write on the wall, right in front of the candelabra for everyone to see. "Mene, Mene, Tekel, Parsin." The king turned pale. His knees trembled. He shouted, "Call the 3 wise men. Whoever reads this and gives me the interpretation will be third in the kingdom." All the 3 wise men came. No one could read it. No one could interpret it. The Queen Mother came in. "There is a man in your kingdom who has the spirit of the holy gods. Daniel, he revealed mysteries to your grandfather." They brought Daniel, already an old man, over 80 years old, but still with the same fire of God. Belshazzar offered, "If you can read and interpret it, you will be third in the kingdom." Daniel replied, "Keep your gifts, but I will read the scriptures. Many, God has numbered the days of your kingdom and put an end to it. Tekel, you have been weighed in the balances and found wanting. Parsin, your kingdom has been divided and given to the Medians and Persians." Belshazzar was still trying to keep his word. He dressed Daniel in purple and put a gold chain around his neck. But it was too late. That same night, while the prophecy was still echoing in the hall, something impossible was happening outside. Cyrus had devised a brilliant plan. His engineers diverted the course of the Euphrates River. They dug canals. They redirected the waters. The level of the river that ran under the walls of Babylon dropped. It dropped so low that the soldiers could walk across the riverbed, but the gates still remained, huge bronze gates that descended to the riverbed. But that night, that very night, the gates were open. Historians can't explain. Why were they open? Negligence? Betrayal? But we know. It was the hand of God. The same God who wrote on the wall opened the gates. The Persian soldiers marched down the riverbed. They went up to the city. The guards, drunk from the party, were taken by surprise. Babylon, the invincible, fell without a battle. Belshazzar was killed that very night, just as prophesied. And then, the next day, Cyrus the Great entered the city as the liberator." And the first thing he did was issue the most extraordinary decree in ancient history. "Thus says Cyrus, king of Persia, the Lord, the God of heaven, has given me all the kingdoms of the earth, and has charged me to build him a house in Jerusalem. Who is there among you of his people? May his God be with him, and may he go up to Jerusalem." This is crazy. A pagan king recognizing the God of Israel as the God of heaven, ordering the rebuilding of the temple, financing everything, right, Cyrus, if you are impressed by the power of God. But Cyrus didn't stop there. He did something even more extraordinary. He ordered the return of all the sacred vessels. There were 5,400 pieces of gold and silver, bowls, chalices, plates, everything Nebuchadnezzar had stolen. And what's more, he issued an official letter authorizing the reconstruction. The house will be built on the place where sacrifices are offered. Its height will be 60 cubits, its width 60 cubits, with 3 rows of large stones and 1 of new wood, and let the expenses be made out of the king's house. The Persian Empire, paying for the rebuilding of the temple of the God of Israel, and anyone who tried to stop the work would be executed. Their house would become a muckets. Think about it. The greatest empire in the world protecting and funding God's people. But why did Cyrus do this? The answer is even more supernatural. The Jewish historian Flavius Josephus records that when Cyrus was shown Isaiah's prophecy written 150 years earlier with his name on it, he was so shocked that he decided to fulfill everything that was written. Imagine the scene. A pagan world-conquering king reading about himself in a prophecy written before he was born. "I am the Lord," saying of Cyrus, "He is my shepherd, and he will perform all my pleasure," saying to Jerusalem, "You shall be built," and to the temple, "You shall be founded." Cyrus trembled. He acknowledged that there was a God over him, and he decided to be an instrument in the hands of that God. Some 50,000 Jews returned to Jerusalem under the leadership of Zerubbabel. They began to rebuild. They laid the foundation. But opposition arose. Enemies wrote letters. They managed to stop the work. But God wasn't finished. He raised up the prophets Haggai and Zechariah. They prophesied. The people were encouraged. They resumed construction. Enemies tried to stop it again. But then they discovered Cyrus's decree in the archives. Darius, the new Persian king, not only confirmed the decree, but added, "Whoever changes this decree, let a beam be taken from his house and hanged in it, and let his house be turned into a bowl." The God who caused his name to dwell there, defeat all the kings and peoples who reach out to change this. The temple was completed. Passover was celebrated. Glory returned to Israel. All for Persia. All for ancient Iran. But God wasn't done revealing Persia's destiny. The prophetic visions continued. Daniel received another vision, even more detailed and terrifying. It was the first year of Belshazzar. Daniel was in his bedroom. Suddenly, he was taken in a vision. He saw the great sea tossed by the 4 winds of heaven. The waves crashed against each other. It was total chaos. And then, out of the midst of the waters, 4 monstrous beasts began to emerge. The first, a lion with the wings of an eagle. Its wings were ripped off. It was lifted up from the earth. He stood up like a man. He was given a human heart. The second, a bear, lifted up on one side, 3 ribs between his teeth. A voice shouted, "Stand up!" Devours much flesh. The third, a leopard with 4 wings and 4 heads. It was given dominion. The fourth, terrible and awful, teeth of iron. It devoured and tore. It trampled the rest. 10 horns. Daniel was disturbed. He approached one of those watching and asked the truth. The answer came back. The lion. Babylon. The torn wings. Nebuchadnezzar's humiliation. The bear. Medo-Persia. Lifted up on one side. Persia, stronger than Media. The leopard. Greece. 4 wings. Speed. 4 heads. Division after Alexander. The 4th beast. You're Rome and the kingdom of the Antichrist. But let's focus on the bear. Medo-Persia. 3 ribs in its mouth. What do they mean? First rib, Lydia. Croesus, the richest king of the ancient world, consulted the oracle of Delphi. If You attack the Persians, you will destroy a great empire. He attacked. A great empire was destroyed, his own. Cyrus conquered all of Asia Minor. Second rib, Babylon. We have seen how it fell, the greatest city in the world, the most powerful empire. It fell in one night. Third rib, Egypt, Cambyses. 2, son of Cyrus, marched with the Persian army across the Sinai Desert. He faced Pharaoh Psamtik III at the Battle of Pelusium. The Persians used a brilliant strategy. Knowing that the Egyptians considered cats sacred, they placed them at the front of the army. The Egyptians did not attack for fear of killing the sacred animals. Egypt fallen. The third rib was devoured. Devour much meat! And it was. The Persian Empire became the largest the world had ever seen. From the Indus River to the Mediterranean Sea, from Nubia to Scythia, 127 provinces, 50 million people, 5.5 million square kilometers. But the most specific and detailed vision came years later. Daniel stood by the Ulai River. It was Belshazzar's third year. Suddenly he was in the spirit. A ram appeared before him by the river. It had 2 horns. They were both tall, but one was taller than the other, and the taller one came last. The ram charged west, north, and south. No beast could stand against it. No one could escape its power. It did whatever it pleased, and it made it enormous. Then Daniel saw something extraordinary. Out of the west came a goat. But this goat, it was different. It came so fast it didn't even touch the ground. It seemed to fly. And it had a noticeable horn between its eyes. The goat launched itself furiously at the ram. Daniel saw the anger in its eyes. The impact was violent. The goat broke both of the ram's horns. The ram had no strength to resist. He was thrown to the ground, trampled, and there was no one to save him. The goat grew extremely large, but at the peak of his strength, the large horn broke off, and in its place grew 4 notable horns. Daniel didn't understand. It was too complex, too symbolic. But then Gabriel appeared, the archangel, and he explained everything. The ram with 2 horns, and kings of Medium and Persia, the hairy goat, and king of Greece, the large horn, the first king, Alexander the Great, the 4 horns, 4 kingdoms that will rise from his nation. And that is exactly what happened. Alexander the Great, at just 20 years old, began his campaign. In just 13 years, he conquered the entire Persian Empire. Battle of Granicus, victory. Battle of Issus, victory. Battle of Gaugamela, final victory. The Persian Empire, which took centuries to build, was destroyed in just over a decade. Alexander died at age 33. His empire was divided among his 4 generals: Cassander, Macedonia and Greece; Lysimachus, Thrace and Asia Minor; Seleucus, Syria and the East; Ptolemy, Egypt, exactly as prophesied, 4 horns, 4 kingdoms. But Persia's story in the Bible was far from over. During the height of the Persian Empire, when it seemed like nothing could threaten it, God prepared one of the most amazing miracles in all of Scripture. And it all started with a refusal. Now comes the part that will make you scream with excitement. It was the 3rd year of the reign of Ahasuerus, Xerxes I, around 483 BC. The Persian Empire was at its peak. Ahasuerus reigned over 127 provinces, from India to Ethiopia. To display his glory and wealth, the king decided to hold the greatest banquet in history. First, a 180-day banquet for all the princes and nobles of the empire. 6 months of feasting, showing off the riches of the glory of his kingdom and the splendor of his majesty. Then a final 7-day feast for all the people of Susa, from the greatest to the least. The palace garden was transformed. White, green, and blue curtains held together with cords of fine linen and purple. Silver rings, marble columns, beds of gold and silver, floors of porphyry, marble, mother of pearl, and precious stones. The wine flowed in abundance, served in golden vessels, each one different from the next. There was no limit to the amount to drink. Each one drank as much as he wanted. On the 7th day, When the king's heart was happy from the wine, he had a fatal idea. He called to the 7 eunuchs who served before him, "Bring Queen Vashti wearing the royal crown. I want to display her beauty before the people and the princes." But Vashti refused. The refusal of a queen to obey the king's command before the entire empire. Ahasuerus was furious. His face burned with anger. He consulted the wise men who knew the laws. Memucan spoke, "Vashti has not only sinned against the king, but against all the princes and all the people. When the women find out, they will despise their husbands. There will be contempt and wrath throughout the kingdom." The sentence was decreed. Vashti was banished. She would never appear before the king again. Her position would be given to another. In his anger, Ahasuerus remembered Vashti, but the decree was irrevocable. His servants suggested, "Let beautiful virgins be sought for the king in every province. Let them gather in Susa. Let them undergo beauty treatments. The one who pleases the king most will be queen instead of Vashti." And so began the greatest beauty contest in history. Officials in every province, thousands of candidates, all the most beautiful in the empire. In Susa lived a Jew named Mordecai, from the tribe of Benjamin. He was raising his orphaned cousin, Hadassah, but no one knew her by that Hebrew name. She used the Persian name Esther, which means star. Esther was beautiful in appearance and lovely to look at. When the decree was published, she was taken to the palace too. Haggai, the eunuch in charge of the women, saw something special in Esther. She found great favor with him. Immediately he gave her the best beauty treatments, appointed 7 special young men to serve her, moved her to the best place in the women's house. But Esther kept a secret. Mordecai had ordered, "Do not reveal that you are Jewish." And Esther obeyed. The preparation process took 12 months. 6 months with oil of myrrh, 6 months with spices and perfumes. Each young woman had one night with the king. Then she went to the second women's house. She would only return if the king nominally wanted her. It was Esther's turn. She asked for nothing more than what Haggai advised, and she obtained grace in the eyes of all who saw her. When Esther entered the king's presence, something supernatural happened. The king loved Esther more than all women. She obtained grace and benevolence in his eyes more than all virgins. Ahasuerus placed the royal crown on her head. He made her queen instead of Vashti. The king held a great banquet, Esther's banquet. He granted relief to the provinces. He gave gifts with royal generosity. But Esther continued to keep her secret. No one knew the new queen of Persia was Jewish. And that's when God began to move the pieces on the board. Mordecai discovered a conspiracy. 2 eunuchs, Bigthan and Teresh, guards at the gate, were planning to murder the king, Mordecai told Esther. Esther told the king in Mordecai's name. They investigated. It was true. The conspirators were hanged. It was all recorded in the king's chronicles. This detail will be crucial later. After that, the king exalted Haman the Agagite. He made him second in command. All the servants knelt before Haman, all except Mordecai. He wouldn't bow down, he wouldn't prostrate himself. The servants asked daily, "Why are you breaking the king's command?" Mordecai revealed, "I'm a Jew. I bow down only to God." When Haman found out, he was filled with fury. But he hated to kill Mordecai alone. He sought to destroy all the Jews in the empire. In the first month, the month of Nisan, they cast lots before Haman to determine the day and the month. The lot fell on the 12th month, the month of Adar. Haman went to the king. "There is a people scattered and divided among the nations. Their laws are different. They do not follow the king's laws. It is not for the king to tolerate them. If it pleases the king, let a decree be issued for their destruction. I will weigh out 10,000 talents of silver for the king's treasuries." The king took off his ring and gave it to Haman. "The silver will be yours, and the people too. Do with them as you see fit." The decree was written, sealed with the king's ring, sent by post to all the provinces. Destroy, kill, and annihilate all the Jews, young and old, children and women, in a single day, the 13th day of the 12th month, and let their property be plundered. The decree was published in Susa, the king, and Haman sat down to drink. But the city was confused. When Mordecai heard about it, he tore his clothes. He put on sackcloth and ashes. He went out into the city weeping with a loud and bitter cry. In all the provinces where the decree reached, there was great mourning among the Jews, fasting, weeping, and wailing. Esther's maids came to tell the story. The queen was greatly distressed. She sent clothes to Mordecai, but he would not accept them. Esther sent Hathach, one of the eunuchs, to find out what was happening. Mordecai told him everything. She gave him a copy of the decree, and he commanded her, "Go to the king, plead for your people." Esther told her to reply, "Everyone knows that whoever enters the inner court without being summoned, there is only one law: they will die, unless the king extends the golden scepter, and I have not been summoned for 30 days. Mordecai responded with words that echo through the centuries. "Do not think that you will escape because you are in the palace. If you remain silent now, help and deliverance will come to the Jews from elsewhere. But you and your father's house will perish." And then the most powerful sentence: "Who knows whether you have come into the kingdom for such a time as this?" Esther made her decision. She sent this reply: "Go, gather all the Jews to Susa. Fast for me. Do not eat or drink for 3 days, day or night. I and my maidens will fast too." And then the declaration of faith and courage: "Afterward I will go before the king, even though it is not according to the law. And if I perish, I perish." 3 days passed. On the 3rd day, Esther, dressed in her royal robes, she entered the inner courtyard. She stood before the king's chamber. The king was sitting on his royal throne. He saw Esther in the courtyard. And then, the miracle. Esther found favor in his eyes. The king held out the golden scepter. "What ails you, Queen Esther? What is your request? Up to half the kingdom will be given to you." But Esther was wise. "If it pleases the king, let the king and Haman come today to the banquet I have prepared." The king commanded, "Arrest Haman." At the banquet, the king asked again, "What is your request?" "Up to half the kingdom." Esther replied, "If I have found favor, let the king and Haman come." Esther replied firmly, "If I have found favor in the eyes of the king, let them come tomorrow. To the second banquet I will prepare for them." The king nodded. Haman smiled. But what he didn't know is that his fate was sealed. That very night, a 50-cubit gallows was built. The plan was simple: hang Mordecai at dawn. But the king couldn't sleep. Coincidence, or the invisible hand of a God who was already turning the page of history? What happens next is a twist that will change the destiny of an entire nation, and the one who planned the extermination will be judged by the same sentence he created. In part 2, you will discover how the king's sleepless night changed everything. The exact moment when Haman's pride became his downfall, and Esther's final act of courage, which exposed the Jewish people's greatest enemy before the throne. Comment on part 2 if you want to see the outcome of this prophetic deliverance. Subscribe and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss the moment when God rewrites the decree of death with life.